Hello everyone, I'm Ann Baldwin and welcome to this edition of Law Matters, brought to you by the law firm of Hassett and George. This segment is about starting and running small businesses. Entrepreneurs and small businesses have consistently proven to be the drivers of jobs, innovation, and the backbone of most local economies. And that's the good news. The bad news is that most efforts to start a business end in failure. But there are things that you can now do and that you need to know to consider so that you can have a better chance at success. We are so happy to have on our Law Matters program today to talk about this attorney, Martin CLAYMAN. He is with the firm of Hassett and George right here in Simsbury. And traveling the furthest, we have Judy GEDGE. She is Assistant Professor of Business Law at QUINNIPIAC University School of Business. Marty and Judy, thank you for being here and sharing your expertise. And I'm really excited about this conversation as a small business owner myself. So first of all, let me just start with, what is your first soundbite of professional advice for people out there? Judy, in the classroom, you've got people with dreams, entrepreneurism. What do you tell these folks getting started?
I think the most important thing is to put together a professional team to support the entrepreneur, to encourage the likelihood of a successful business. Who should be on that team? You might have some ideas about this. I would say at a minimum, a business lawyer, an experienced business accountant, an insurance agent, a banker. Who have I missed?
You got covered the waterfront, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, you really can't do it alone. And what that allows the entrepreneur to do is to focus on what they do best, which is to come up with their ideas, to pursue their passion in starting and building their business, and rely on other people to do, well, I guess we could say the grunt work, the stuff that's not quite as exciting as launching that new idea.
And to your point, Judy, you know, a lot of people have great ideas, a lot of people have that entrepreneurial spirit, but a lot of people, Martin, don't have the expertise. And I know when starting my business, I thought, well, I have this concept, I have this idea, I'm just going to run with it. But it's not that easy. You do know what you're good at and know what you need professional advice for. So why don't you touch upon that? Let's say somebody out there has an idea. What is step one?
Well, there are many legal considerations, as you know, in formation of a new business. And early on, once somebody gets the bug that they want to start a business, usually one of the first things they think about is, what are they going to call this business? Mm-hmm. What kind of a name are they going to use? And this is the first possible trap for the unwary, where it helps to have some guidance, or at least to know what you're doing. And that is that if you decide to form a business and use a fictitious or an assumed name, then there is a little form you have to fill out, a certificate of trade name that must be filed in the town where the business is going to be operated. And the purpose of that really is to protect the public, because if somebody comes into a store and falls down, they have to know, well, who can be sued for leaving the banana peel on the floor, shall we say. So for that reason, if anybody has an idea of a fictitious or an assumed name, you know, quality cleaning. Well, that's not a name of an individual. So it's so how do we know who owns quality cleaning? And it's a matter of filing a form. It's one of the first things I think you have to think about in getting started once you start a business. Once you file that form, you never have to renew it. You never have to touch it. It's there as long as you have your business.
The other thing, too, isn't it important that you do research to make sure that nobody else has that name? And as we look at now the internet and social media and domain names, it may sound good, and that may be what you want to call it, but somebody else had the idea before you, so it's kind of taken. Is that not true, too?
Yeah, the next problem, which is now protecting the individual. See, we think about protecting the public with filing a trade name, but we also think about the individual or the entity in protecting the trademark or the brand. And to that end, you need to do some research. And it's not terribly difficult today to do this research. The first place I tell people to go is to go online to the United States Patent and Trademark Office. It's online. You can find out if somebody has that name already, which gets you out of a lot of trouble. And the other possibility is a trademark search with the Secretary of State's office in Connecticut. We have both state trademarks and federal trademarks, depending upon whether you're doing business just within the state or across state boundaries.
So you have to pay attention to all that. Judy, in the classroom, you've got these, great minds that have this dream of starting their own business. I was listening to a radio program last night that said, more and more people have increasingly thought about starting their own business and see that as the way out of, kind of the situation that they're in, that working, 9 to 5 for somebody you don't necessarily want to be working for, but the security of that paycheck, the insurance coverage, whatever it might be, but they don't out of fear. How do you address that with your students at Quinnipiac? What do you tell them about the fear factor?
Well, for the most part, I don't deal with that issue because I'm just the boring lawyer. But fortunately, I have the opportunity to work with wonderful colleagues who provide advice and skills in entrepreneurship to our students. There is such a level of excitement amongst the young people at Quinnipiac. I'm sure that not just at Quinnipiac, but I have the opportunity to see them there. The ideas for new businesses, the excitement. At one time, us old fogies might have thought that, yeah, I'm so sorry to put you in that category. I'm an old fogey. Might have thought that, get some experience under your belt. You shouldn't really think about starting a business until you're, in your 30s or something. Oh my gosh, that is so old school. These are kids who have grown up in the era of Facebook. They've grown up seeing people that have started businesses in their teens that then get bought out for large sums of money. And it's just terribly exciting to see them and at least in a very small way to be part of that with them. So yeah, I'm sure there is fear associated with launching a business. Maybe to some extent the younger people haven't quite adopted that approach.
Right, and I think, and again, we're getting a little bit off topic, but when you're young and you don't have all those responsibilities yet, timing is pretty good, but when you're locked into the house, the kids, all those responsibilities, it's a little bit scarier. I know I had, a regular job before I started my business, and that was one of the reality checks, like, I've got to make this happen. For me, it helped with the determination and with the success of my company. So, those are all things to consider. Martin, you talked a little bit about the entity, and this is one of the things when I started my business, I really needed professional advice on, because there are different entities depending on the type of business. Are you going to be a C Corp, tax benefits, et cetera? Are you going to be an LLC, a limited liability corporation? How does one decide, and I'm going to ask both of you this, but how does one decide which one fits them best?
Well, it's an analysis like everything else, and people who come to me, they tell me the type of business they're going to be involved in. Are they going to be international, for example? Are they hoping to, let's say, be in foreign trade? They're going to be doing business overseas. I might be inclined to recommend that they form a corporation, because most people throughout the world understand what a corporation is. Mm-hmm. The other choice, which is a very popular choice these days, is a limited liability company. And the reason for that is that corporations tend to be a bit formulaic and formal, in that there are layers of individuals or types. You got a director, you got a shareholder, you got an officer, you got an employee. Usually when you're dealing with a limited liability company, you have a member, and that's basically it. There are no directorships. So the member is the owner, whereas in the corporation venue, the stockholder is the owner. But you've got all these other formal layers that have to be dealt with. And there are meetings that you have to have with corporations that are not necessarily done. So if it's a small mom and pop, almost for sure we're going to recommend a limited liability company. The days of the partnerships are sort of gone forever, because partners have unlimited liability. Whereas in a limited liability company, there is limited liability. In other words,
back on you personally if something should happen.
Exactly. You're liable for the extent of the equity that you have in your business, unless of course you personally guarantee something. If you go to a bank,
why would you do that?
Well, you want the money, you go to the bank,
right.
You sign your name, and you want the lease, you go to the landlord, they want a guarantee. And so there are problems where you still have personal liability, but it limits your liability in many ways.
Judy, what about if you start your business and you don't, foresee doing work, let's say overseas, but you expand and you're successful and you want to change that? Can you go back and change how your business was set up originally?
And I think the best approach to that is to understand what your goals are, both short-term and long-term. And with that in mind, to work with your professionals to choose the business entity, the business structure that's going to be right for the long term. Yes, for most business entities, from a legal standpoint, you can jump through bunches of hoops to change the structure, but it will be expensive, it will be bothersome, and it's much better to address that up front, because that doesn't even deal with the fact that there may be negative tax consequences to changing the structure of business. So again, that goes back to having your team together up front, and be able to brainstorm, talk with your team members about not just what you want to do the first week, but where you see your business going in 5, 10 years or longer than that.
All right, we're speaking with attorney Marty CLAYMAN from the law firm of HASSETT & George, and Judy GEDGE, who is a professor at QUINNIPIAC University and also a lawyer. Why did you decide that you wanted to take that legal expertise and apply it to the classroom, Judy? I'm just curious.
Well, in the past, I had the opportunity to teach legal workshops to people who were starting business, and I did that for many years. I still do that a little bit. And I so enjoyed that. To be able to take what some people might think is a little bit of dry legal knowledge and to essentially explain why that's important for a small business owner to understand and apply to help them achieve their goals. So for many years I was doing that in the business context, and I just decided, gee, I wonder if there's an opportunity to do this in a educational institution. So,
and there was, and you did.
And I've just loved
Talk
it.
about entrepreneurism. Marty, let's talk a little bit too about zoning, location, depending on the business. So you say, okay, I'm working at this hair salon, I'm just going to take this and do this out of my house. Or I'm doing this mail order business and I'm just going to turn my garage into a warehouse. What are the things that people don't take into consideration when doing that, and what kind of trouble can they get into if they don't do it the right way?
Well, the consideration is that there are zoning laws in almost all towns, at least in the state of Connecticut. I can't speak for some of the more, states where they're very rural. There may be some areas that don't have zoning law, but we have zoning regulations, and the zoning regulations are there to protect the public again against, overcrowding of the streets and air pollution and environmental pollution and so on. So therefore, there are a lot of regulations that tell people what you can do and what you can't do when it comes to what we call the bricks and mortar kind of business. You're opening up a store, even if it's in your home. Town of West Hartford, if you have a home-based business, you have to register your business in the town.
Regardless if people are coming and going or not, even if you're on your computer running your business.
Exactly. They want you to do that. Now, it may be in part a revenue-raising measure, but in part they want to know who's doing what. There are, the town of Simsbury, for example, has zoning ordinances regulating a home-based business. And a lot of people run a home-based business. They think, well, that's great, I'm doing this out of my home. Well, can you hang a shingle outside and advertise your name? Can you have a lot of employees coming and going? Well, the answer is pretty much no. If you're going to have a home-based business, most of the zoning regulations will prohibit signage, prohibit outside employees. Members of the family usually are okay. Will prohibit lots of people coming and going, and that type of thing, which only makes good sense in a residential neighborhood. The other part of zoning is that there are many kinds of zones, like there's residential, there's a multifamily, there's commercial, there's industrial. And there are some types of businesses that can go in any zone. A church is a wonderful example. Museums is another example, where you can put them in almost any zone, but they still require a special permit. In other words, you just can't say, okay, I'm a church, I'm a synagogue, I'm going to go into this particular residential area. I was involved a number of years ago where a Buddhist temple wanted to locate in West Hartford, and It was very controversial because it was in a residential zone near Tumblebrook Country Club, and there were a lot of people that just weren't used to the idea of any type of a house of worship. But it's there. You wouldn't know it. There are no signs. There's no special lighting. There's nothing there to indicate, you know, what it is. But it's there. So it's just a matter of working within the framework. And my recommendation is to stay out of trouble. If you're going to go into any store or business at all in a fixed location, go to see the town planner and ask what you can do and what you can't do in that at that particular location, and then you'll get all the information you need.
Judy, did you want to add to that?
Well, you know, I was thinking as you were saying that how helpful it can be to go to town hall. For one thing, you can buy a copy of the zoning regulations.
Yes.
Find out what's allowed and what's not allowed. Also, we haven't talked at all yet about people who buy businesses. And one of the things that someone might want to look at if they're buying a business is a trip to town hall to check with the zoning enforcement officer, to check with the building department, to see if there have been any problems identified. Because it's one of those things that you want to, as a buyer or as a buyer's attorney, you want to know about beforehand so that you can address it rather than being surprised afterwards.
Right, so you want to make sure that the person before you did it right.
Yes.
And followed the rules and followed, more importantly, the laws, because you don't want to buy somebody else's problem.
Correct.
Right. I'd like to just give you another
Sure.
example. I had a client who was going to buy a piece of property to locate an accounting firm in West Hartford, and they retained me to represent them. And I said, well, West Hartford is really tough when it comes to parking because they require so many parking spaces for every so many square feet. It could be like one space per 1,000 square feet. And we went to the town hall and they said, well, this building is limited to 15 spaces. Well, they had 10 employees and they're open to the public, and it left really virtually no room for their clients to come. So they had to pass on the building. Now, if we hadn't done that and they bought the building, they would have been a legitimate deal, but they would have been stuck. So that's why you have to know to go down to the town hall, as Judy said, and nose around and find your way. And it's not that difficult. They're helpful down there.
Right. How much do you recommend people have for startup costs? I mean, all this stuff, buying this, getting this advice, hiring this person. I know when I started my business, my funds were limited. So what kind of a budget are you looking at? Is there any kind of a, you know,
I think it varies so much from business to business. I think that it's important to work with your accountant to set a realistic budget, and then, I don't know if you've experienced this as well, Marty, double or triple that reserve for contingencies because things always come up. Or, you know, when I've met with people who were planning to start a business and I'm not an accountant, but I just ask questions. And, you know, I'll say, well, what's your startup budget? What's it consist of? And then they'll tell me, and I say, well, and what are you setting aside for working capital? You know, because there's going to be a ramp-up time. And I think that's maybe an area that people underestimate. And that can make for challenges in a business, and it can also make for a very stressful situation.
Right. And you both have been doing this a long time. I mean, from your experience, how long does it usually take for someone to become what you might term successful?
Well, you know, usually the first year or two, many businesses lose money. And I always tell people, you can expect to lose money unless you're a known concept. Buying a franchise is a little bit different. I don't want to get into that because that's another issue, but that's why a lot of people do buy franchises. But when you do a startup and you're not known, nobody knows who you are, you've got to plan on losing money. And that's why, as Judy said, operating capital, working capital is something that you have to have a fair amount of to expect to lose money in the beginning. Partly because you have so many startup costs. I mean, you have to buy that insurance policy to begin with. You have to put that security deposit down when you take over the space and give that security deposit to the landlord. You have to hire employees. You still have to start paying them their salaries. You have to start paying your taxes. You still have to start paying for energy use and so on. These fees and expenses start out right away. Well, when does the money start coming in? And if you're on like a 30-day billing type of cycle, I mean, it's great if you got a cash business and the money starts coming in a little bit faster.
But most people are net 30 or 60.
That's right.
And you have to take that into consideration.
Yes.
And
so
unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people give up, saying that they just can't, you know, sustain that length of time. But that's something you should think about, like you said, before you put yourself in that situation.
Exactly. You need a business plan, really, and that's what most people, if they sit down and think about it, and there you can get something like that online. It may not be the ideal.
But it gets you thinking. It gets you through the process.
That's it.
Yes,
That's
and then
exactly
there's
right.
agencies also that will sit down with you and help you.
There's so many resources
Yes.
here in the state of Connecticut. Small Business Development Center has offices. They provide workshops. SCORE, which is an arm of the Small Business Administration. Many adult community ed programs. You know, there's so many people and resources available here in the state of Connecticut for people that are planning to start a business.
And I also appreciated the peer-to-peer support too. I want to know what other, it's like a support group. You want to know what other people are going through, learn from each other's, you know, strengths and weaknesses. And for me, finding a mentor, somebody that would help me along and help me not make mistakes that potentially they had made, was also very valuable. How friendly is Connecticut from your perspectives on supporting small businesses and getting them started and helping them to be successful?
Well, as I say, I think there are many resources that are available for little or no cost to people who are thinking about starting a business. As I say, the SBA through SCORE, the Connecticut Small Business Development Center. There are a number of women's business organizations that provide free or very inexpensive classes and programs, many of it geared to developing a business plan, and I think that's a tremendous resource for people here in the state.
Marty, you've been working with people for a long time,
Yes.
helping them with their businesses. Share, you know, one of your favorites, if you can kind of pluck one out of your experience, of a success story where you really helped, you know, that professional advice and that legal advice that you gave somebody really helped them become what they are today.
Well, gosh, there's so many stories that I can think of. Some of them, well, the funniest story, I don't know if this is exactly in response to this, but I did have a client who came to me to buy a franchise, and I sit down and I do an analysis of the franchise, and it was rather critical, and I told the client, I think you better forget about this. It doesn't look very, very good. It doesn't look promising. And the next time I heard from him, excuse me, he called me up and he said, I bought this business, and it was a valet business, and I'll never forget this. And he said, I have some problems and need some help. I said, well, what do you mean you bought this business? He said, well, you turned me off on the first one. I knew for sure if I called you, you were going to tell me again not to buy it. I wanted to buy this business so badly that I went ahead and did it on my own, and I'm so sorry that I didn't come to you for advice. So, you know, is that a success? No, it's not a success. I understand that, but it's just something that is remarkable. And there's another story where I have people come to me all the time and they say, look, do I need a lawyer? They say this all the time, do I need a lawyer? Now, of course, they're expecting me to say, of course you need a lawyer, because I am a lawyer and it's a self-interest. But there are sometimes I'll say no, and there are sometimes I'm going to say yes, depending on the circumstances. So there's one particular individual who came to me and he asked me to review his documents. And he said, you know, I can read, I got a college education, but why don't you look through this anyway? I mean, he was like, I'm going to let you do it. And I went through the documents and I said, well, there's something here that ought to come out, and the word is audited. They want audited financial statements. You get rid of the word audited, you're good to go. 6 months later, he called me back and he said, I just went to a conference of all these people, and I was the only one that didn't have the word audited in my document. And you just saved me about, well, $4,000 to $6,000 a year times the number of years of the franchise. He says, you saved me a bundle of money. So I tell people it could be one word.
One word
can make the difference.
Kind of like legislation. One word makes all the difference.
One word can make the difference.
And Judy, you see that too as a lawyer. And that's where that professional set of eyes needs to be on the situation, because somebody else, the layman, might be good and have a great idea, but not understand the long-term or even short-term impacts of one word.
Well, and I think also It's a shame if people think of lawyers as deal breakers. What we really do is to help our clients to understand what the benefits and risks are of what they're proposing to do and leave it in their hands to make those decisions, but make an educated decision.
Right. Well, this is fantastic advice. It's a very complicated issue, but I think the bottom line for the people watching this program is, you know, figure out what's going to work best. Don't jump into something. Get the right people around you that you do feel comfortable with and that are going to give you the right, they're not there to take your money, they're there to help you make money, correct?
That's the name of the game. That's what we're all there for.
Right, that's really what it's all about. So in our next segment, and I'm going to have you both back to talk a little bit more about some additional details in starting your own business. And Judy, if people want to contact you, how can they do so?
Through Quinnipiac University School of Business.
Okay, so if you go on their website, I know Judy's contact information is there. And I'm going to tell people how they can also contact you. You're at the law offices of HASSETT and George, offices right here in Simsbury. So I know that you're both good people and you want the best for small businesses because that really is the future of our economic success. And I can tell you, it's so refreshing. For me, I work harder than I've ever worked in my life, but you know who I'm working for?
You.
Me. That's a beautiful thing. So thank you both very much. Judy Gedge, Assistant Professor of Business Law at Quinnipiac University, and also Martin Clayman, attorney for the law firm of HASSETT and George, as we mentioned, right here in Simsbury. Thank you for your expertise and for sharing your advice with our viewers on this segment of Law Matters. Again, should you want any additional information regarding this program or any other legal matter, you can visit HASSETT and George's website at hgesq.com. I'm Ann Baldwin, and thanks for watching this segment. We'll see you back here again for another edition of Law Matters.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.